Welcome to the Hidden Potential Podcast. I'm your host, Homer Hargrove, and today we are talking with Andy Howard. Andy was born in Bryan, Texas, and currently lives outside of Dallas, Texas, with his wife, Tiffany, and his three beautiful daughters, Payton, Parker, and Presley, all P's. And for over 20 years, Andy has served in ministry as a youth pastor, as a marriage ministry pastor, and Andy is an advocate for mental health awareness, as he has known the heaviness of depression himself. He's passionate about fighting against the awful attacks of mental health issues that are running rampant across the human race. And really diving in from there, Andy, I want to ask you if you could share your story, because I know that right now you're traveling and you're sharing your story, you and your family stories, with churches, conferences, youth camps. You're a keynote speaker. You have your own podcast, and you also you just came out with a book recently too, as well. Yeah. So can you kind of just share your passion and what it is that you're passionate about?
Hey, Homer, thanks for having me, first of all. And sure, man. Dude, if I could give one word for what I am passionate about, it would stand for hope. Because there was many times in my life where I felt like I had lost all hope. And this was coming from a guy who was preaching about hope and speaking about hope as a youth pastor for many of the years during what I later found out was my depression. But now my story is you're not done yet, man. And so much of my story didn't happen. Of what I wrote about didn't happen until I turned 40 years old, which many people, they bring out the black balloons and you're over the hill, you're halfway home, all that stuff. And for me, that was kind of a kickstart for all of this. So my challenge for whoever's catching this podcast today would be that, hey, you're not done yet, no matter how old you are or young you are. And there is always hope for you, no matter what you've gone through. There's always something. It's wild that the things that almost killed me, literally, the thing, like whether it was my food addiction, my weight, depression, those things that almost killed me are now what has propelled me to do what I'm doing now. So don't ever give up. And the things that are attacking you today could be the very things that help free you. So it's just been a crazy journey, and I'm just excited to help as many people as I can.
That's a really powerful concept, because I feel like when it comes to depression, I feel like I was not raised in church. And so I feel often late to the game. And what I found is that topic of depression, it feels really confusing amongst churches. Like, there's some churches that are like, oh, it's just all spiritual. Like, I remember seeing this TikTok one time of this guy saying, if you're feeling depressed, you just got to run through your house and say, praise Jesus, and it'll go away. And I was like, man, that's crazy. Like, you're crazy. And I feel like there's such a misunderstanding within the church about depression. And here you are being a minister and experiencing depression. I mean, what was that like for you when it came to, I'm not trying to say specifically for the church that you were serving at, but the kind of the response of the general church? How do you feel like the church handled that for you?
Well, for me, my pastor was amazing. I'll tell you that part up front. He was awesome, but he didn't know. For the longest, he didn't know. I didn't tell anybody. I put a smile on my face because of all the things you mentioned, and I don't know that our church per se was like that TikTok guy you mentioned, but there is always this stigma, I guess, with depression, and even as a minister, that you're supposed to have it all together. Even though we know in Romans, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We've all sinned. I'm not saying depression is even a sin, but I do think that sometimes we put ministers on a different level, like, that they have it all together, and so we can't let our guard down. We can't let someone see we're hurting, and that's just this stigmatism, I guess, that has to be fixed. And I've found the more I share my story, the more awareness I bring that we're all human, man. We all face things. We all go through trials. And no one of us are more deserving than the other. Like, I think this happened for me, not to me, if that makes sense. at the time I didn't see the big picture going through it, and it still hurts. There's still times that even my daughter right now that I wrote the book about is in the hospital right now, and just having another lengthy stay. She's been healthy for so long, and you can't help but kind of ask those why me questions when stuff like this happens. But I know that God has a plan for her life, and for us, he's opened so many doors through this story that I've met so many people, been on podcasts like yours, Homer, where I would have never met you without this situation. So God has been so faithful through all of it. And so I would just encourage everyone just to hold on to that hope that you have, that you don't know how it's going to be used going forward.
I really resonate with that because I feel like it shows a glimpse of God's redemption. And for me, I remember a moment where I went through a really heavy season of depression as a minister, as a youth pastor. And I remember I felt so isolated, so alone. I felt so discouraged. And I was to a point where I was fantasizing about suicide. I was imagining ways to take my life. And it was such a difficult and dark place.
Yeah.
And I remember I finally opened it up about it with one of the spiritual leaders of the church. And I just poured my heart out. And I was to the point where I was getting afraid. My wife was afraid. I was, getting farther and farther into this darkness. And so I just laid it all out. And his response to me was, well, I don't think you should tell anybody else about this. Because if you do, they're going to take you out of, you're not going to be able to be ministering anymore. So just keep this to yourself. By the way, I'm going to have to start meeting with you a lot less because I have other things I'm going to have to start working on. So it's like this huge,
oh my gosh.
it's just like, look, just like keep it down, suppress it. Don't tell anybody about it. By the way, you're not even going to be able to talk to me anymore. And it was just like the worst exchange of how to handle someone that is going through real depression. And similar to your story, like now I see it has helped me to see a perspective that I would have never seen before. But I got to say, I really don't believe that everything happens for a reason. I'm like against that belief because that would mean that even like the Bible says that God doesn't tempt anyone to sin. And even when people do sinful, evil things in the world, that would mean that God meant that to happen. I think more so, this world is chaos and just horrible. It could be so painful. It could be beautiful at times, but it's so full of evil and wickedness. But God's redemption is so strong that it seems like it was all for a reason. Because in the end, God redeems even some of the worst tragedies, and we are able to see a glimmer of hope and purpose after God redeems it. On this note of talking about your journey, talking about the power of hope, power of redemption, what do you feel like has been your greatest obstacle coming from being a minister and going through this journey? What was your greatest obstacle in getting to the other side?
Man, there have been so many. And from John 10:10 that I'm sure you know, and most people have heard, even if they haven't been to church a whole lot in their lives, but it's a very popular scripture. But it says the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And I believe that for me, that there's been so many ways that Satan didn't want my story to get out. Satan didn't want all the trials, all the obstacles to get out and to help people, because so many people are getting help through the story, through the podcast. I'm getting texts and emails and people who I would have had no way of ever meeting, at least through my own eyes. I never saw it coming. And so the other half of that verse that's so powerful is that Jesus came and God came so that we can have life, have it more abundantly, have amazing life. So for me, my biggest obstacle has been myself, overcoming it, whether it's the depression, whether it's the weight. I was 345 pounds. I was sick. I mean, the sickest of sick. I had so many things, from high blood pressure to sleep apnea, just so much stuff. And fatty liver disease, I mean, you can name it. And now I just completed a beast in the Spartan, which is 3 other races. So, it's been crazy, but all of it came right here with me getting out of my own way. So I wrote a book. I had so many self-limiting concepts on myself for years that, oh, you're not a writer. You don't, you don't even know how to write a book. You don't know what to do. What if you do write the book? Who do you go to after that? How do you get this out? You've never done a podcast. All that. I'm very good at talking down to myself, and it's lies from the enemy. Again, steal, kill, and destroy. He doesn't want you to do the things you were called to do and created to do. And I do feel, whether it's through a podcast or a book or through my health journey, helping others, that we were called to bring hope. I was called to bring hope. That's my story. That's my calling. And that's what the devil or the enemy, however you believe it, is trying to prevent this story from getting out there for me. And so my biggest obstacle has been myself. Having to get out of the way, sometimes do things scared, do things afraid. It's not always easy. I love speaking to people. I love speaking to large crowds. I'm so much more comfortable there, and you get me in a one-on-one situation, and I am rather introverted. So that's the irony. People are like, how do you speak to lots of people, but yet one-on-one, you get weird on me. And it's just how I was made, man. I don't get it. But so that's been another obstacle. I'm having to do things scared for the greater good. It's what's on the other side of this fear, right? What comes if I push through this? And so for me, it's been just getting out of my own way, and sometimes doing things scared, and doing what I feel I'm called to do, and no longer playing scared, no longer playing on the other side.
I find so much in what you're saying, and some big parts is like this imposter syndrome, this insecurity that everyone feels, but it feels like you're the only one that feels it. And I feel like so often I would hear people, as I was aspiring to be in leadership and kind of up and coming, and I would hear like podcasts and people talk about how you just gotta overcome your fears, and it's kind of like you don't realize really what they're talking about until you're actually going through it. It's like you don't know what imposter syndrome is until you're actually going through it, and then when you're going through it, you typically don't recognize it. We just like we go through this state where we are not recognizing things that we're going through that we already heard about. And everyone feels like they're not good enough. Everyone feels like they don't got it. And the people that do feel like they got it often don't. But it's this huge insecurity of all the reasons why we can't. And when we are able to kind of just overcome and do it anyway, just like you're saying, overcoming those fears and just doing it, even though you're able to see impact that was even greater than what you could expect. It's like I feel like as a youth pastor, I was surprised when people would tell me like, oh, you made such a difference in my life. And I was like, really? I almost felt like guilty that I didn't do more. And it's such a powerful concept to think that your greatest obstacle can be your own thoughts about yourself, your own insecurities. And
it's true, man.
Now that I'm a minister too, like I've been in ministry for 13 years, it's like I'm recognizing that when I am not right in my own mind, if I'm off when it comes to defeating that insecurity, defeating that imposter syndrome, when I have the criticisms of others, it makes me utterly confused. They're like, well, maybe they found me out. Like, oh no, that maybe they're right. Maybe everyone else thinks that about me too. And it's usually just one person that's just being a jerk and has their own insecurities. They're incredibly insecure, so they're trying to point at you. And how we handle those insecurities really shows in our behaviors. Like you're saying, how it started coming out through eating and overeating. And when I look at like my upbringing, I turned to drugs and alcohol at a very young age. Wow. And it's like so easy for us to try to find that vice and recognizing, what am I going to when I'm just not feeling enough? And we distract ourselves. And I'm talking even as specifically as young leaders and ministers are going through this and not recognizing those insecurities, not recognizing that they're feeling really overwhelmed or discouraged. at the thought of what they're not being enough to what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so we turn to overeating, or we turn to video games, or we
Whatever
turn
it
to
is. Yeah.
anything. And
Yeah.
so often we don't even recognize that we're doing it. And tell me this, how do you now process that overwhelming feeling? Like, how do you process those insecurities now that you don't go to overeating? How do you get past that?
Man, for me, it's been structure. And so, and I still have to, still every time before I speak, or every time before I join a podcast, man, I have to pray and remember why I'm doing it, and get grounded with the Lord, get grounded with God, and He will help you. He will help you every time, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't. For me, it hasn't just gone away, and it may not ever go away. But I'm willing, and I've told Him that I would never say no. I would never say no to an invitation to share my story, because my story is ultimately about Him and how He's helped me through everything. But for me, structure wise, I don't necessarily enjoy working out. It's not a fun time, but it has become a staple. Like, I get up, I do my routine, I do my workout, I spend my time with God, I spend my time in prayer, and I have all these things set in place, unless there's an absolute emergency, like with Payton, my oldest daughter, who's been she's been in ICU the last couple of weeks. So me and my wife, we've been we still have twin girls as well at home. So life unfortunately goes on, and I don't mean that as in we forgot about her, but there's still things happening. So one will be holding down the fort here, the other will be holding down the fort at the hospital, and we'll switch back and forth. And so even on those, maybe I haven't been able to do every single day like my normal routine is, but when I'm home, I'm still getting my workout in. I'm still staying grounded, and that's what I have had to do to help me, is have more of a routine. I'm very structured. I never realized that about myself. For years, I just ran chaotically, I would describe it, because I didn't have structure in my life. And what I found was, when I was able to get a routine down, as simple as that sounds, it has brought such calm to me, because my brain does overthink a lot. And so when I know, well, hey, it's 9 o'clock, this is what I do at 9 o'clock, or whatever that is, it's actually helped me. And so for me, structure has been so huge, whether that's, working out, which gets me in the right tone for eating and being healthy for the day.
Right.
Whether it's spending time with God, in my prayer time, in my reading, that gets me grounded with the Lord, and ready to take on whatever I have for the day. Even before I speak, those insecurities, they will pop their ugly heads up every time. And I have to remind myself, it is not about me. Not about me. I can go down there and fall on my face. That's fine. But it's about the Lord. It's about the people who are there, and who may be hearing my story for the first time, who may have a chance to encounter God for the first time, or overcome, depression or something, because they hear a little bit of hope in our story. So I try to stay grounded in God, as easy as that is. And it's not always easy, but it's something I do one step at a time, one day at a time. In the book, I even talk about it, even 1 hour and 1 minute at a time. Sometimes it's coming down to just taking it. Okay, hey, we survived this 9 o'clock hour. Let's try again at 10. So taking it minute at a time, if that's what it takes.
That's such a powerful concept, because I feel similar to the thought of that. I can be very structured. Like, I see things in systems, and even when I look back on when I was going through depression and those discouraging moments, it was like the simple disciplines of, like, I'm gonna write my journal every day, because I have to. I'm going to draw this sketch just because I feel like I have to. It's like finding those things that help you process. And for me, like, sketching was one of those things. Like, if I couldn't find the words to say, I would sketch. And it's like, just, I knew that I had to, and it really helped me to process those things. And even now, like, I love working out, even and when people ask me like, why do you like working out so much? Like, what motivates you? I jokingly say, well, I feel like it's the only thing I can control in my life.
Wow. Yeah.
It's like
And there is
everything
something
else is
to
chaos.
that. Yeah. Well, you had a bad day. Hey, you can take it out in the gym, man. And
Yeah.
even for people who have suffered from depression, I didn't realize this at the time, but there's so much joy that comes from working out, from sweating, all the endorphins, all the things.
Yeah.
It helps your mind by working out.
Yeah.
So, and if nothing else, you don't have to think about anything for an
Yeah.
hour or whatever your workout schedule is. You can get in there and
Yeah.
just
And even for
let
me
go things.
too, I realized even recently, like my workout routine is kind of like like the sacred time.
Yeah.
And I started trying to be overly productive. Like, I should listen to podcasts or something while I work out. And there's one day where I was doing, as like a week or so, a couple of weeks, I did that. Well, usually I would just have, it was my time. And when I started doing podcasts and trying to be productive, even while I was working out, there's a day where I literally had a panic attack. And I didn't even understand why I was having it. I didn't feel like I was overly thinking something but it's like, I didn't realize how sacred this time was, that like I needed to just keep it separate and allow work to be work and allow this decompression time to be decompression time instead of more work. And I love how you said that even though life gets crazy, that you just do what you can. And I think so often when we like the idea of starting a routine, we like the idea of getting structure, like, okay, I'm gonna get my life together, I know that I need to do this. And then what I have found is like, even just with my kids, it's like a conspiracy. I started working out in the morning before they would wake up. All of a sudden they start waking up an hour early. It's like this, it's madness. It's pure chaos. At any time I would try to set a routine, something would happen to throw it off. And it's so easy for that to happen in our lives. And we kind of get fed up, throw up our hands like, oh, that's it, I'm not trying anymore.
It's not meant to be.
Yeah. And we give up. But I like how you said, it's like, you just do what you can. Like, it's not about, oh, I'm just going to throw out the whole pie because, the flour didn't come out right. I don't know, but I don't even bake, but the thought of just giving up because it didn't work one time, two times, three times. It's, it goes back to Proverbs. It's maybe, I feel like we usually look at that verse as like deep emotional part of when it says, the wicked may fall, but the godly may fall 7 times and get back up. And it's like, no matter what happens in your routine, just get back up and try again the next day. And I love that grace about it, because we plan things without the acknowledgement of our chaos world. It's just like, things will not go according to plan, and doesn't mean we just stop. So, I love how you talk about how you overcome, you talk about the greatest obstacle being yourself, and how you overcome that. Where you're at now, you've been 20 years in ministry. Now you're being a keynote speaker, you're being hosted on podcasts, you have your own podcast, you wrote your book. What would you say now at this point in your journey are you most proud of?
I think it is the book. And maybe it is just, if I really dialed in, maybe it would be just being here today and taking it day at a time, what we just talked about. Because 10 years ago, I never attempted suicide, but and that was more of just a moral thing for me. I was just like, well, I've been told all my life, this is one of the things you can't do, which never stopped me from doing other sins. I don't know why for that one. That was like the big sin, I guess. And I don't even know that. That's a whole nother podcast, probably. I was raised so legalistic, just being honest. Well, that's like the one sin that you can't get forgiveness for, because you can't ask for forgiveness. And I know now, I'm looking at, when God, and so I'm probably just opened up a whole nother rabbit trail here. Sorry. But just from where I started, I just never thought that I would be here today, just being real with you, Homer. 10 years ago, 14 years ago, so my daughter's about to be 15 on the 27th of this month. And so we got her diagnosis about 9 months in. And over that next 4 years, I didn't want to live. And I didn't know what to do about it. I knew I couldn't. In my eyes, I could not commit suicide, definitely. So that was, and I'm grateful. Thank God for that. And so I just couldn't. But at the same time, I was like, God, if you want to take me home, I'm not going to stop you. I didn't want to live. I wasn't happy. It took everything I could to get out of bed in the mornings and put on this fake mask. And like you said, you couldn't tell everybody. And I hate that you had that kind of situation with someone you trusted.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that would be the response. And turns out it wouldn't have been for me with my staff that I was with, because I've opened up with them and I've even got to go minister back at the church I was at for so many years and tell my story. But gosh, for the longest, it was just surviving the day, right? Surviving the day. And now I have so much joy. And I think it is the book because I was supposed to write it 10 years ago after I felt like I got free from the depression. And I always knew I was going to tell my story and I was going to share this and I was going to write the book. And for 10 years, it was like, yeah, I'm going to write a book one day. But I don't know that I ever truly believed I was going to write a book.
Right.
Just something I would tell everybody. I would tell all my friends. I'd tell family. I'd tell coworkers, other pastor friends of mine. Yeah, I'm going to write a book. Oh, that's great. It kind of became a thing. Like, oh, Andy's going to write a book. But did I ever truly believe it? And like you said, for my own mental health, I started journaling. Even then, when I was journaling, I didn't know that was going to lead to the book, even though I'd always said I was going to write it. After 2020 happened, and I guess so much isolation and anxiety and just depression seemed to skyrocket.
Right. We didn't know if it was going to be the end of the world or if we're going to just be
just everything you were hearing about. It became a thing. Everybody was going through some form of depression, or everybody was going through anxiety and something. And I was like, dude, how can you not write the book? Now, for the longest, I thought it was about me. And again, goes back to that it's about me concept. So the whole longest was, I don't know if I can write the book. And then at the end, it was like, how can I not write this book to help others? And so I think my biggest accomplishment would be writing the book, whether or not anything comes from it is another story. But that I actually overcame that is just a huge milestone for me personally. And I'm just grateful to see now all the lives that are being touched from it. Every time I get a text or an email or somebody pull me aside and say, man, this really helped me get through my life or save my life. It's just overwhelmingly cool in a positive way, overwhelmingly feeling.
That's so great. And what I gather from your story is this 2 millimeter shift to where one day you go from, I'm going to write a book. And it's almost like I think that we see things like that as this tangible accomplishment. And up to a certain point, it's like this will make me successful. This will show that I overcame. And then all of a sudden there's this 2 millimeter shift to where now all of a sudden you see it, that the motivation is for others and how it can affect others and serve others. And boom, you get a book just like that. And
it is.
And it's just like this, when we look at really what ministry is serving others. And we minister in all these different ways, spiritually, at face value spiritually and behind the scenes spiritually. And when we realize that it's not about me or it helps that imposter syndrome go down, that those insecurities go down, and realize, man, this could really help somebody. It helped me. Why would I not? How could it not help someone else? And so often we talk to people about things, like someone shares their downers or their bummers, and we want to help them, and we often, the number one thing people do is say, I remember when I was going through this, and we use that to try to help someone else. So a lot of ministry is like that. A lot of writing books is like that. Sharing your story is simply that, in a more of a professional turn or way, a professional method. And just for our listeners on the podcast, the topic of suicide, that's a really, really heavy topic. And I personally, I've never once said that it's not a sin, but I don't believe that it's a one-way ticket to hell. There's plenty of people that die unexpectedly without asking for forgiveness for every single sin they committed that day. And
that's the shift. And I didn't clarify. Could I just, I started rambling, but that was the shift I had with my mindset. You know, when Jesus, when he conquered sin, he conquered it. If you believe in him and you've accepted him in your life, and that's the key. And I think for years I was so black and white with, I lived like what, you know, back in the back in the day, you're in the game room. I don't remember what it was, but you're trying to beat the gophers that are popping up in your whack-a-mole or whatever that game was. I kind of felt like God was sitting there, and it was a horrible way to live. But that's what I felt like for years for me. Every time I sin, like he's just waiting to beat me down, and it couldn't be further from the truth. He's longing to have a relationship with me. But sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's I appreciate your insight, and I feel like that topic, because we're talking about hope, we're talking about being discouraged and overcoming it, and that thought of suicide is prevalent in so many people, but it's often isolated, in the church traditionally has made it impossible to talk about, because someone wants to open up dialogue about it, like I'm having these dark thoughts, I'm feeling, you know, this, that, and the response is, well, if you do that, you're gonna go to hell. And so it's like you're someone is literally already broken, they're so discouraged and they feel alone, and now you're telling them not even God understands you. Like it's this, I feel like it's such a, the intention might be maybe innocent in the sense of trying to fear tactic someone out of suicide, but not even our salvation is beckoned by fear. It says in Romans that it's his kindness that draws us to repentance. So if it's not fear that draws us to salvation, but God's kindness, why would it be fear that takes us out of depression, or fear that takes us out of the thoughts of suicide? I just find it very counterintuitive, and it just I just don't find it biblical. There's no biblical backbone to the idea that suicide is a one-way ticket to hell. It's just not biblical. But going into another question, you know, where you're at now, all that you've experienced in early ministry, going through discouragement, and now feeling at a place where you're looking back and saying, wow, I can't believe, you know, I made it this far. What would you say is a question that you wish you would have asked earlier?
Dude, I don't know if it's a question or not, but if I could give younger Andy some advice, I would just tell him, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. It's okay to make mistakes, and you fell forward is what I use the term a lot. Fell forward, just keep going, like you talked about in the scripture. Just keep getting up, you know, keep getting back up. Fell forward, and I so many times we think we have to like have this perfect life, and everything has to be perfect, and oh, here's my one big chance. I have this interview today for this job. If I get this job, everything will be perfect, and then you put so much pressure on yourself, and if you don't get the job, then what happens? It's okay. What did you learn from that interview, right? How can you get better? What can you take away from that? Who are the people in your life? Who are the people you're surrounding yourself with? I've heard and I don't remember who wrote it's from a book, but I've heard the quote so many times. You're most likely like the 5 people you surround yourself with. And so I started doing inventory, like, who are my friends? Who are my real friends who really care about me, who I've let in? And like when you had that situation happen, that, gosh, could have been so crippling for you. And I am so grateful to see you here today. My friends who I've opened up with, who know my deepest, darkest secrets, and now the world is starting to learn it as I start to share more and more. What I found is the more I open up about it, the lighter the burden gets, you know, the easier it gets to carry. So those 5 people, and there's probably more than 5, but for this example, it's like the more I open up to say, hey, this is what I struggle with. This is my depression. This is my hurt. This is my heartache. The more I found that my burden has gotten lighter, that it's been easier to carry, that I don't have to carry it by myself. One, that God has it, and he's exchanged it for peace and his just his yoke is easy.
Right.
His yoke, like we're teamed up like two oxen or ox, however you say that. We're teamed up, we're yoked together, and his burden is light. And
Yeah.
so the more people I let in to help me carry this burden, the easier it's gotten. So my encouragement would be to find people in your life that you can trust. That's very important, who you open up to,
Yeah.
because otherwise you could find yourself in a situation like Homer, getting bad advice, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah. You're
And
having
not only am
suicidal
I going to
thoughts.
give you
Go lock
bad
yourself in a
advice,
dark room. Yeah.
not only am I going to give you bad advice, but I'm about to exit stage right. So you're officially on your own here.
Yeah.
And that's the worst. So I would just, my encouragement would be to find people in your life that you can trust, and then just keep failing forward. And by that, I
Yeah.
mean, keep trying, keep
Yeah.
trying. Because when so many times when we have a hiccup, when we have a failure, when we don't succeed, whatever that is for you, it's like, well, I tried. One meant to
Yeah.
be. What's next for me? I got to try this other thing. And it doesn't always happen overnight. Sometimes the
Right.
greatest things I've learned in my life have come from my failures. The greatest
Right.
thing. And now I'm speaking about them. I'm preaching about them. I wrote a book about them.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's the things that try to kill you that are going to bring so much joy to others, because people relate to your failures, man. People
Yeah.
relate to your trials through, because the devil, I think the enemy would like for you to feel like you are all alone. You are the
Yeah.
only person in the whole world dealing with depression right now. Oh,
Yeah.
how could you be a pastor and be depressed?
Yeah.
What kind of failure are you? So what I've found is I was not alone. And so
Yeah.
that's the trick, is keep going. Keep going. Don't ever give up.
I love how you make this about not about yourself. See, we often think of like, what can I do? What question should I ask myself? What advice could I give myself years ago? And you're projecting that's not necessarily about you or who you are, but who you're surrounding yourself with. And I similarly, I found that my level of victory, whether it's recovery, whether it's depression, whatever, my level of victory is dependent on my level of transparency. And
Yes.
I feel like in the struggles and the hardest points of the years of being Christian minister, whatever, that the biggest struggle I had was feeling like I was going through it alone,
Yeah.
and feeling like I didn't have somebody to talk to, or that I didn't have close friends to talk to, share with. And I feel like like the depression I experienced like lasted for years. But when I finally found somebody, a mentor, a spiritual person I could that talk to, it's like, man, that's when it really started to alleviate. And that's when I
Yeah.
really started finding kind of going past like bearing, enduring this day to, man, I feel like I'm actually getting past this. And
Yeah.
it's so powerful about how community really is necessary for our
Yes.
lives. I mean, in Genesis, the very first creation of man in the Garden of Eden, for crying
Yeah.
out loud, God said it was not good for man to be alone. In
It's
this
good.
perfect
Yeah.
haven where he literally walked with God. So the closest relationship you could ever have in human history. And God said it's not good for man to be alone.
Mm.
And we've made it so churchy. We've made it so overly spiritualized, the concept of feeling lonely. Well, God is all you need. It's like, not even Adam thought that. Not even
Come
God
on.
thought that.
That's
It,
good. Yeah.
and so if Adam needed somebody to be with, then by God, we sure need somebody to be with.
Yeah.
And it's like God knows that we are awaiting heaven. That
Mm.
even in the when the world seemed perfect in the garden, it was only a temporary place. And to know that God has made us as emotional beings as well as physical and spiritual beings that have a desire and need for community, that we shouldn't neglect that. It's so powerful. And I think that so many young leaders or people aspiring for ministry leadership, that they neglect how necessary healthy community is.
Yeah.
And it just is just a powerful concept of how we need people, good, healthy people, not toxic people.
For
Got
sure,
toxic people,
man.
just try somewhere else. But
Unfortunately, there people will be people. So that's why I say fail forward. Like in your
yeah,
situation, had you quit seeking help or seeking another person to confide in or talk to, maybe you wouldn't eventually never found the help you needed.
yeah,
So yeah, unfortunately, people are people. We love them. That's why we minister. That's why we serve people. But then sometimes you have to deal with people. It's just part
yeah,
of it. But we do our best. And
yeah,
God loves them too. God loves all of us. He created us
yeah, yeah.
uniquely. He
Yeah,
did. So that's why it's
God
so
bless them. Yeah.
yes, that's why it's so wild, I think. All these personality, and it's beautiful. It really is. It would be so boring if there were however many million billion people on the earth just like me. It would be such a boring place to live in. So but
Yeah.
yeah, I agree
It
with you 100%.
we definitely need diversity in our community. It's a healthy thing. And when I say toxic people, it's not that there's a culture of toxicity. It's just
Yeah.
it's usually people that are
And
so succumb to pride that they don't see any perspective outside of themselves.
come
And
on.
it's just toxic.
Yeah.
With 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 all that, what would you say is, coming near to a close here, um, in your journey, whether you would say personal leadership, ministry, etc., what would you feel like is the biggest necessary change that you made?
Oh man. Forgiveness, I guess,
Mm,
uh, for myself, because I did hold myself. And you can, if anyone's interested, they can dive into the book. I don't have that kind of time, but
yeah.
when my daughter was born, I held that responsibility as my fault, and it's a long story. I mean, but she was basically my wife was in labor for 54 hours with her, and I was
Wow.
doing the whole. It's our first baby, and I was doing the whole
Yeah.
5-1-1 rule. The contractions are 5 minutes apart. They're lasting for 1 minute, and there was the other one. I don't remember. It's been a while since I had a baby. But anyways, I was nerdy notebook guy, like, oh my gosh, honey, we're here. And so it was time to go to the hospital, but we were young. And the doctor who was I mean, when we went to visit her, she was like, I'm not gonna mention her name or anything, but she was #1 in all of Dallas and on all
Right.
these magazines and Doctor of the Year and all. So I trusted her because I didn't know. I've never delivered a baby. And
Yeah.
she kept kind of laughing. I was, oh, you kids, you are so excited to have a baby. You'll know when it's time. You'll know when it's time. And so we went back and forth 3 different times. And by the time she was born, she had lost oxygen. She was in the birthing canal for that whole time.
Wow.
And she survived, but now she really has 10% brain function and
Yeah.
just has a really tough life. And so for years, I was like, dude, it's your fault. Like your personality. I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I don't like confrontation. I avoid it. And for years I was like, why didn't you stand up to the doctor and say, no, I'm doing what you told me and all the things.
Yeah.
And so for years I held that against myself, which led to the depression, which led to isolation. You mentioned all these things earlier. And both of those feeding on themselves led to a very dark place in my life.
Yeah.
And so forgiveness when I finally and it came through seeking help. And my wife, I thank God for her. She prayed for me. She stayed by my side the whole time.
Wow.
But she was the only one who knew, like, this was our little secret for years, right?
Yeah.
But she knew I was not the same husband that she had married,
Yeah.
or same guy that she had married and the husband I became. And so she finally said, hey, you need help.
Yeah.
You need help. Let's seek help. And so for the longest, I wouldn't go to a counselor. I thought they were counselors, like, you see it on TV or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like these leather couches you lay on. The whole thing was weird to me. I didn't want to do
Yeah.
that. I'm an introvert. I thought one-on-ones are not good for me. But she kept saying, hey, let's try it. Let's try it. And had I
Right.
not done that, that was massive for me. And so she's the
Right.
one and she was a godly counselor who prayed before each session. So you
Right.
can find that out there.
Yeah.
And she's the one that got to the realization that, Andy, you're holding yourself hostage over what happened to you. You need to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
And I did not think that was possible for me. And I didn't even realize I was doing that until sometimes it is that perspective, someone from the outside looking in that sees the picture. Now it's so much easier for me to see it in myself
Yeah.
that I couldn't see. So
That's so powerful, Andy. And
yeah,
I feel like the way you described that right now, that holding yourself hostage, so often, I mean, I think some of the hardest tragedies to get through are the ones that seem like they could have been preventable.
yeah,
And because we hold ourselves accountable because we want so badly for it to have been a different outcome,
yeah,
that just like you said, like holding ourselves hostage to in a sense to try to hold justice for what happened.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, it's just simply not so. And even though it seems like it could have been preventable, it's like
yeah,
this happened,
yeah.
this happened, period. It's not about prevention. It's like, this is just a
That's where we're
horrible
at. Yeah,
bummer. This is a horrible thing that happened. And I really resonate with your story of just like loving your child so much. Every single one of my kids had, except for my son, had a traumatic birth.
mm.
My first child, they ended up pulling her out with forceps, and I thought she had
Oh,
died on delivery.
oh my
and
gosh.
and she like, it was just traumatic. It was like the worst feeling to have your
Yeah.
baby come out and thinking that you lost them. And it was so scary. And then our daughter Jules, she got stuck on her neck, and she was code blue, and they pulled her so hard to get her out because they were pulling for a long time that they broke her collarbone, and she wasn't
Oh my
moving when she
goodness.
came out. It's hard for me to even still talk about, like,
Yeah.
it's just and those things hit so much deeper, like what you're describing with your daughter. It hits so much deeper that I feel like people can't understand unless you go through it. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like it's kind of like the same thing like with marriage. Is like, before I got married, everyone said, "Oh, you'll understand when you're married." I'm like, no, I can get it now. And
Yeah.
once I got married, I really understood what they were talking
Yeah.
about. And it's
Yeah.
the same way with like having kids. I was a youth pastor without kids,
Yeah.
and I thought that I knew what it was like to be a parent. I'm around these kids all the time. I could raise teenagers. And now that I'm a dad, I'm like, I had no idea what I was talking
Yeah.
about. I had no idea what it takes, or what it really feels like. And it's just the moment that you have your baby, it's like
Mm.
it's just like hits you. It's like there's something that's born inside of your heart. And
Yeah.
I resonate with your story so much. And that idea of being able to let go of the past and move forward was like really the essence of like that forgiving of
Yeah.
yourself, and being able to move on, and knowing that you're not doing an injustice to
Mm.
anybody by letting
Yeah.
go of that past to move forward. In fact, you're helping them to move forward. You're helping
Yeah.
them to move on as well as you do it. Whether it involves someone else or not, it's like the only way to move forward is by letting go of the past sometimes, and with the mistakes and all that comes with it. So I love how you paint that. And so we talked about a lot today, Andy. We really were able to cover ground when it came to hope, overcoming discouragement, and really just working on ourselves
Yeah.
inwardly, and how that alone can help structure us to be able to withstand the trials that we go through, whether it's in life, whether it's in ministry, leadership, whatever. It's about working on ourselves first.
Yes.
For anyone that wants to connect with you, Andy, how can they find you?
Homer, thank you, man. It's been an honor just being on your podcast, and thanks for taking the time. To andyhoward.com is probably the easiest way. You can find out about the book, find out about the podcast as well, or social media as well. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, just Andy B. Howard, like B like boy, Andy B. Howard there.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for being with us today, Andy. I love your story. Thank you for being transparent, sharing it with our audience today. Everyone else, for being a part of the Hidden Potential podcast. So grateful for you. I hope that this show was edifying for you. Hope that it made a difference in your life. All that being said, have a great life.